Most people think discipline fails because they are weak. They think they lack willpower. They think something is wrong with their character. They think they are broken. But what if the problem is not weakness? What if the problem is the way the order was given? Because this is where it usually starts. You set a goal. You make a resolution. You decide that this time, everything changes. And then, instead of snapping to attention, your mind rebels. You tell yourself, change your whole life tomorrow. Study for 5 uninterrupted hours. Be perfectly disciplined from now on. And almost instantly, something inside you pushes back. That reaction feels personal. It feels like failure. But it is not random. It is friction. And that friction is created by the grand gesture. We live under a strange deception. We believe that taking control of our minds requires overwhelming force, a huge declaration, a dramatic act of will, a complete reinvention overnight. But that is often the very thing that guarantees resistance. Because these commands are not really instructions. They are declarations of war. They sound powerful. They sound serious. They sound like commitment. But they are too large to act on. They are not clear, concrete steps. They are impossible orders. And when the mind receives an order that is vague, massive, and threatening, it does what any system does when overload is detected. It goes into defense. This is the anatomy of internal rebellion. First, the oversized command is issued. Change everything. Fix your life. Become disciplined forever. Then threat detection activates. The mind reads the scale of the task and recognizes danger. Not physical danger, but cognitive danger. Exhaustion, pressure, burnout, collapse. Then the defense mechanism triggers. Resistance appears. Procrastination appears. Confusion appears. Avoidance appears. And finally, the system shuts down. The goal is abandoned. The energy disappears. The whole plan falls apart before it even begins. This is why self-sabotage often feels immediate. Not because you are lazy, not because you are weak, but because the system is responding exactly as it was designed to respond. That is the crucial shift. This is not a moral failing. It is a design feature. The myth says you failed because your character is flawed. You failed because you do not have enough discipline. You failed because other people are simply stronger than you. But the reality is very different. Your mind is protecting you from an impossibly expensive command. That immediate rejection you feel when you set a massive goal is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that your neurological system is trying to protect you from overload. That means the solution is not more force. The solution is better design. Because the fantasy of overnight transformation is exactly that. A fantasy. Overwhelming force depends on one fiery moment of inspiration. One emotional high. One perfect wave of motivation. But those moments do not hold. They feel powerful for a moment, and then they collapse under their own weight. Real discipline is not built in a dramatic burst. It is built incrementally. Brick by tiny brick. Action by tiny action. Compliance by tiny compliance. And that brings us to the first real tool, the zero-friction micro-contract. The terms are simple. I will focus for exactly 60 seconds. That is all. The input cost is nearly zero. The threat level is almost undetectable. And because the scale is so small, the probability of compliance becomes extremely high. This is the genius of the micro-contract. It is so manageable, so reasonable, so light, that the mind has no reason to rebel. There is nothing to fear, nothing to defend against, no overwhelming demand. The contract is signed immediately, and once that first contract is honored, something important changes. A precedent is set. 1 minute becomes the first piece of steel. Then 5 minutes becomes possible. Because now the mind recognizes a history of compliance. Resistance lowers. Then 10 minutes becomes possible. Momentum begins to build. Trust begins to form. And this is the part most people miss. You are not just passing time. You are building evidence. You are building a history with yourself. You are teaching your mind that when you give a command, you obey it. Not through force, not through fear, but through repeated proof. That is how trust is created. And trust is what makes discipline sustainable. Now compare that to the other path. The path most people chase. Intensity. The flash fire. This is the heroic workout that destroys you in one session. The all-night study marathon fueled by caffeine and panic. The sudden burst of motivation where you try to become a completely different person in one day. Intensity burns hot, but it does not last. It consumes everything at once. It burns through energy. It empties the system. And when the fuel is gone, only ash remains. That is the problem with intensity. It looks impressive. It feels dramatic. But it is unstable. The mind cannot be shaped by a flash fire. It can only be shaped by the forge. So now we have two modalities of action: the flash fire of intensity and the forge of repeated obedience. The flash fire is made of grand gestures, sudden motivation, exhausting effort, rapid burn, and eventual shutdown. The forge is made of small contracts, deliberate pacing, rhythmic repetition, controlled heat, and lasting resilience. One path produces burnout, the other produces steel. And that brings us to the mechanics of the forge itself. Every forge needs heat. In your life, the heat is your intent, your ambition, your desire to change, your focus, your vision for something better. But heat alone is not enough. Heat by itself only melts metal. It does not shape it. The real shaping comes from the hammer, and the hammer is not one giant blow. It is the repeated rhythmic strike. 1 minute of obedience, then another, then another, then another. Small, consistent acts, strategic acts. That is what gives the mind its new shape. That is what forges resilience. Not emotion, not intensity, not inspiration. Repeated obedience. That is the architecture. That is the system. That is how self-sabotage is overridden. Not by becoming someone else overnight, but by becoming the kind of person who obeys one small instruction right now. And now the theory is complete. The forge is hot. The next minute is a blank slate. It does not care what happened yesterday. It does not care how many times you failed before. It does not ask for perfection. It only asks for one strike, one small act, one honored command, one first brick. The hammer is already in your hand. Strike now.